The flashlight beam shook in my hand as I stepped closer to the shallow grave. My boots sank into mud still soft from yesterday's rain. Deputy Martinez was on his knees, brushing dirt away from something pale that shouldn't have been there. The forest around us had gone quiet. No birds, no wind, just the sound of our breathing getting faster. Detective Lawson, Martinez called out, his voice tight. "You need to see this." I knelt beside him. The soil had collapsed inward, revealing bone. Human bone. My stomach twisted. We'd been searching Black Hollow Forest for 2 days, following an anonymous tip that felt like a prank. Now I understood why the caller's voice had trembled when they said, "She's been there a long time." Nobody wanted to find her. Martinez pulled back more earth, and I saw fabric, blue denim, faded but recognizable. A jacket. My mind raced through missing persons reports I'd memorized in my 15 years on the force. Blue denim jacket. Female. Black Hollow proximity. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "Call it in," I said quietly. "Full forensics team. And Martinez, tell them to pull the Hannah Brooks file from archives." His head snapped up. Hannah Brooks? The teacher who disappeared 8 years ago. "Yeah," I whispered, staring at the earth that had finally given up its secret. That Hannah Brooks. Within an hour, Black Hollow Forest transformed into a crime scene. Yellow tape stretched between trees like caution written in ribbons. Generators hummed as portable lights turned night into artificial day. Forensic techs moved carefully around the grave, photographing every angle before excavation began. I stood back, watching my breath fog in the cold October air. Captain Pierce arrived, her face grim as she surveyed the scene. She'd been a sergeant when Hannah disappeared. I remembered because she'd fought to keep the case active longer than department policy allowed. "Is it her?" Pierce asked. "Won't know for certain until we get dental records," I said. But the clothing matches what she was wearing the night she vanished. Blue denim jacket, black boots, and the location, this is 2 miles from her apartment complex. Pierce stared at the grave. "We searched these woods 8 years ago." "Not thoroughly enough," I said, keeping my voice neutral. The original investigation had concluded Hannah left voluntarily. Stress from work. No evidence of foul play. Her car found abandoned. Keys inside. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just a woman who apparently decided to walk away from her entire life. Except Hannah Brooks wouldn't have done that. Her mother insisted it. Her friends swore it. But nobody listened because the evidence suggested otherwise. Or maybe because someone made sure the evidence suggested otherwise. Back at the station, I dropped the archive file onto my desk with a heavy thud. Dust puffed out from the edges. The folder was thick, nearly 300 pages of interviews, search reports, and surveillance footage. But as I started reading, gaps appeared. Big ones. The initial missing person report came from Hannah's mother, Virginia Brooks, on October 14th, 2016. Hannah hadn't shown up for Sunday dinner, something she never missed. Phone calls went unanswered. Virginia drove to Hannah's apartment and found it locked. Hannah's car was discovered 3 days later in the parking lot of Riverside Park. Engine cold, doors unlocked, keys on the driver's seat. No purse, no phone, no indication where she'd gone. The investigation lasted 6 weeks. Then it was quietly shelved. No evidence of criminal activity. The final report stated, subject likely experiencing emotional distress and chose to leave area voluntarily. I flipped through witness statements. Co-workers described Hannah as dedicated but stressed. Students loved her. She seemed happy on the surface, but maybe hiding something underneath. The kind of speculation that sounded reasonable until you realized it was built on nothing concrete. Then I found something that made me pause. A domestic disturbance call logged 4 days before Hannah disappeared. The address was her apartment building. Officers responded, found no disturbance, cleared the scene. No follow-up investigation. No name attached to who called it in. That felt wrong. I pulled the audio recording of the domestic disturbance call from digital archives. The timestamp read October 10th, 2016, 11:47 p.m. I pressed play and listened to a woman's panicked voice break through static. There's shouting coming from apartment 3B. A woman. She sounds scared. like she's trying to get someone to leave. The dispatcher asked standard questions. Could the caller identify voices? Did she hear threats? The woman hesitated. I couldn't make out words exactly, but she kept saying please and just go. Then it got quiet real fast. Too quiet. Officers arrived 12 minutes later. Knocked on Hannah's door. No answer. Checked with neighbors. Nobody reported hearing anything. The responding officers noted in their report, no signs of disturbance. Possible domestic disagreement resolved before arrival. Case closed. Except I knew the officer who took that call. Officer Derek Paulson. He'd retired 3 years ago after 22 years of service. Solid record. Respected. But something about this report bothered me. The lack of thoroughness, the quick dismissal, the way it never connected to Hannah's disappearance 4 days later. I dialed Paulson's number. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. I left a message asking him to call me back regarding an old case. Professional. Polite. But my instincts were screaming that Derek Paulson knew more than his report suggested. Hannah Brooks came to Riverside as a second-grade teacher in 2014. She was 26 years old, fresh from graduate school, and eager to make a difference. According to her personnel file, she exceeded every expectation. Parents requested her specifically. Students cried when they moved to 3rd grade because they had to leave her classroom. I sat across from Principal Eleanor Grant at Riverside Elementary. She was in her 60s now, silver hair pulled into a tight bun, eyes red-rimmed behind wireframe glasses. Hannah was exceptional, Eleanor said softly. Not just skilled, genuinely caring. She saw each child as an individual. She stayed late tutoring struggling students without expecting extra pay. She organized fundraisers for families who couldn't afford school supplies. Did she ever mention feeling unsafe? I asked. Eleanor shook her head. Never. She seemed happy here. Although, she paused, choosing words carefully. The last few weeks before she disappeared, she seemed distracted, tired. I asked if everything was okay, and she said she was just dealing with some personal matters. What kind of personal matters? She didn't elaborate. I assumed maybe relationship problems or family stress. Hannah was private about her personal life. She never complained. I showed Eleanor a photograph. Do you recognize this man? Eleanor studied the picture of Mark Delaney, Hannah's neighbor from apartment 3A. He'd been interviewed briefly during the original investigation and cleared. He came to school events sometimes, Eleanor said slowly. Parent-teacher conferences, the fall festival. I thought it was odd since he didn't have children enrolled here. Did Hannah seem uncomfortable around him? Eleanor's expression darkened. Now that you mention it, yes. She always found excuses to end conversations quickly when he approached. Mark Delaney still lived in the same apartment building. I stood outside apartment 3A, studying the door before knocking. 3 sharp raps echoed down the hallway. He answered immediately, like he'd been waiting. Mid-40s, average height, thinning brown hair, forgettable features except for his eyes. Too focused, too intense. Detective Lawson, I said, showing my badge. I'd like to ask you some questions about Hannah Brooks. Something flickered across his face. Surprise? Fear? It vanished before I could identify it. Hannah, he said softly. I haven't heard that name in years. Did you find her? We found remains in Black Hollow Forest. We're working to confirm identity. He stepped back, gesturing me inside. The apartment was neat, almost obsessively organized. Books alphabetized on shelves. Kitchen spotless. Everything precisely arranged. But what caught my attention was the photographs on his wall. Pictures of the apartment building, the parking lot, the entrance. Surveillance in the guise of art. You were neighbors with Hannah, I began. For 2 years, Mark said. She was a wonderful person. Very kind. I worried when she disappeared. Did you two interact often? Occasionally. We'd chat in the hallway, talk about weather or neighborhood news. Nothing significant. I pulled out my notebook. On October 10th, 2016, 4 days before Hannah disappeared, police responded to a domestic disturbance call at this address. Do you remember that night? Mark's expression remained neutral. Too neutral. I don't recall any disturbance. The call came in at 11:47 p.m. A neighbor reported hearing a woman in distress. I sleep deeply. I wouldn't have heard anything. but his hands had tightened on the armrest of his chair. I interviewed every remaining tenant from 2016. Most had moved away, but I tracked down Amy Chun, who'd lived in apartment 2C across from Hannah. Amy met me at a coffee shop downtown, her fingers wrapped nervously around a paper cup. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s now, with dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. "I've thought about Hannah every day for 8 years," Amy said before I could ask my first question. "I felt guilty every single day." "Why guilty?" "Because I knew something was wrong, and I didn't push hard enough." Her voice cracked. Hannah told me she felt watched. Not followed, just observed. She said it was probably paranoia, but she'd catch someone standing in the parking lot staring up at her window. She started closing her curtains even during the day. Did she say who was watching her? Amy hesitated. She never named anyone specifically. But Mark from 3A, he was always around. Always. Like he kept track of when she left for work, when she came home, when she had visitors. He'd find excuses to be in the hallway when she was getting mail or taking out trash. Did Hannah seem afraid of him? Not afraid exactly. More uneasy. She told me once that Mark offered to fix her leaky faucet, and when she politely declined, he showed up anyway with tools. Just let himself into her apartment, using some excuse about the building manager giving him permission. I leaned forward. "Did you tell the police this when Hannah disappeared?" Amy's eyes filled with tears. "I tried. I called and talked to some officer. I told him about Mark's behavior, about Hannah feeling watched. He took notes and said they'd look into it, but nobody ever followed up. I found a call log. Amy Chun had contacted the police 3 days after Hannah disappeared. She'd spoken with Officer Derek Paulson, the same officer who'd responded to the domestic disturbance call. Paulson's notes were brief. Neighbor reports subject acting nervous in weeks prior to disappearance. Attributes anxiety to work stress. No actionable concerns regarding third parties. That wasn't what Amy described. She'd specifically mentioned Mark Delaney's concerning behavior, but Paulson's report contained no mention of Mark at all. The interview had been sanitized, stripped of anything that might have redirected the investigation. I tried calling Paulson again. Still no answer. I left a second message, more direct this time. "Derek, this is Detective Lawson. I'm investigating the Hannah Brooks case. I have questions about your response to calls in October 2016. Call me back within 24 hours. Then I drove to his house. The address listed in the department retirement records led me to a modest ranch-style home on the east side of town. The lawn was overgrown, newspapers piled on the porch. I knocked repeatedly. No one answered. I peered through the front window. The living room was empty, not just of people, but of furniture. The house had been cleared out. Derek Paulson was gone. Forensic analysis confirmed what I already knew. The remains belonged to Hannah Brooks. Dental records matched. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. Time of death, approximately 8 years prior, consistent with her disappearance date. But the forensic report contained another detail that changed everything. Evidence of post-mortem relocation. Hannah hadn't died in Black Hollow Forest. She'd been killed elsewhere and moved to the woods days or possibly weeks later, which means whoever buried her had time to plan, Captain Pierce said, reading the report over my shoulder. Time to clean up the primary crime scene. Time to make sure nobody connected the dots. I spread out a map of Riverside on the conference room table. Hannah's apartment is here. Her car was found at Riverside Park, 2 miles south. Her body was discovered in Black Hollow Forest, 2 miles west of her apartment. 3 separate locations forming a triangle. Pierce studied the map. The park was a misdirection. Make it look like she drove there and left voluntarily. Right. Which means the killer had access to her car after she was already dead. Had to move it, stage it, plant the keys. Someone who knew her routines, Pierce added. Knew she wouldn't be immediately missed because it was a weekend. Knew which locations would draw search attention away from where she actually was. Mark Delaney fit that profile perfectly. But we needed evidence, not just suspicion. Pull everything on Delaney, I said. Employment records, financial history, phone records from October 2016. And find Derek Paulson. I want to know why he's running. Mark Delaney's employment history showed a pattern. He'd worked as a security systems installer for 12 years. He had access to surveillance equipment, knew how to bypass alarms, understood how to enter buildings without leaving traces. His work orders from October 2016 showed he'd installed a security camera system at Hannah's apartment building on October 8th, 2 days before the domestic disturbance call, 6 days before Hannah disappeared. I obtained a warrant and reviewed the building's archived surveillance footage. Most of it had been recorded over after 90 days, standard protocol. But I found fragments from early October 2016. One clip showed Hannah entering her apartment at 8:15 p.m. on October 10th. Alone. 30 minutes later, Mark Delaney appeared in the hallway, standing outside her door. He didn't knock, just stood there for 6 minutes before walking away. At 11:35 p.m., 12 minutes before the domestic disturbance call, the footage went dark. The system shut off. When it came back online 3 hours later, there was no record of what happened during that gap. Mark Delaney had the knowledge and access to disable the cameras. He'd created his own window of invisibility. I brought Mark in for formal questioning. He arrived with a lawyer, which was his right, but his calm demeanor unsettled me. No nervousness, no defensive posturing, just quiet cooperation. "Mr. Delaney," I began, "you installed the security system at your apartment building in October 2016. "That's correct. It was part of my job. "Do you remember the system experiencing any malfunctions?" His lawyer started to interject, but Mark held up a hand. "There were occasional glitches. Old building, old wiring. Sometimes cameras would go offline temporarily." "Convenient glitches," I said. "Especially on October 10th, the same night police responded to a disturbance at Hannah Brooks' apartment. I don't control when technical issues occur, detective." I slid a photograph across the table. Surveillance footage of Mark standing outside Hannah's door. "Why were you outside her apartment that night?" He studied the image without emotion. "I heard raised voices. I was checking to make sure everything was okay. But you didn't knock. You didn't call police. You just stood there. I didn't want to intrude if it was a private matter. What happened during the 3 hours the cameras were offline?" His lawyer cut in. "My client has no obligation to speculate about system malfunctions." Mark leaned back, his expression unreadable. "I went to bed, detective. Whatever happened to Hannah, I wasn't involved. You have no evidence suggesting otherwise." He was right. We had suspicion, circumstantial connections, behavioral patterns, but no physical evidence linking him to Hannah's death. Not yet. Virginia Brooks sat in my office, her hands trembling as she held a cup of tea she hadn't touched. She was 73 now, her hair completely gray, her face lined with grief that had never healed. "I knew she didn't leave willingly," Virginia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hannah called me every Sunday at 2 o'clock. Every single Sunday for her entire adult life. She never missed. Not once. Tell me about the last time you spoke with her," I said gently. "Sunday, October 9th, 2016. She sounded tired but happy. She just finished grading papers and was planning to visit me the following weekend. We talked about making her grandmother's apple pie recipe together. She was excited about it." Virginia's eyes filled with tears. "The next Sunday, she didn't call. I waited until 3, then 4. I called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. I drove to her apartment. Her car wasn't there. I knocked and knocked, but she didn't answer. I knew immediately something was terribly wrong. Did Hannah ever mention feeling unsafe?" Virginia nodded slowly. "About a month before she disappeared, she asked me if it was normal to feel like someone was paying too much attention to you. Not threatening, just too interested. I told her to trust her instincts, but I didn't push her to elaborate. I should have." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook. "After Hannah disappeared, I started documenting everything. Every conversation I had with police, every search I organized, every dead end." She handed it to me. Inside were meticulous notes spanning 8 years. Dates, names, questions that were never answered. On one page, circled in red ink, was a single name, Derek Paulson. "That officer," Virginia said, her voice hardening. "He told me to stop calling. Said I was wasting department resources. Said Hannah was an adult who'd made her choice to leave. But I knew he was lying. I finally located Dara Paulson through his sister. He was living in a cabin 2 hours north, supposedly retired and enjoying solitude. But when I showed up unannounced, the man who answered the door looked nothing like someone enjoying retirement. Paulson had aged badly. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped the doorframe. "I wonder when you'd find me," he said. We sat on his porch, the afternoon sun filtering through pine trees. Paulson stared at his hands, unable to meet my eyes. "I made a mistake 8 years ago," he began. "A mistake that's haunted me every day since." "Tell me about the domestic disturbance call on October 10th. He exhaled slowly. I responded with my partner. We knocked on Hannah Brooks' apartment door. No answer. We were about to clear the scene when Mark Delaney came out of his apartment. He said he'd heard the shouting too, but it stopped. He seemed helpful, concerned. What happened next? Paulson's voice dropped. Mark offered to check on Hannah the next day since they were neighbors. He said he didn't want to alarm her by having police force entry if everything was fine. It seemed reasonable. We left. That's not procedure. I know. Paulson's hands clenched into fists. But Mark mentioned he was former military, worked in security. He had this calm authority that made you trust him. And honestly, we were overwhelmed that week. Domestic calls, break-ins, 2 assaults. We took the easy out. You never followed up. No. And when Hannah disappeared 4 days later, I panicked. I realized I'd made a catastrophic error. If I admitted I'd failed to properly investigate that call, my career was over. So I buried it. The confession hung between us like smoke. Amy Chin called you, I said. She told you about Mark's behavior. Paulson nodded miserably. I minimized it in my report. Told myself it was probably nothing, that Hannah left on her own for unrelated reasons. I convinced myself I hadn't contributed to whatever happened. But I knew. Deep down, I always knew. Armed with Paulson's statement, I returned to Mark Delaney. This time, we searched his apartment with a warrant. The team worked methodically, photographing everything, dusting for prints, searching for evidence that had survived 8 years. In a storage closet, we found boxes labeled Security Installations 2016. Inside were files for every job Mark had completed that year. Hannah's building was there, but so was something else, a separate folder containing photographs. Dozens of them. Hannah leaving her apartment. Hannah at the grocery store. Hannah at school. Hannah through her apartment window. Mark had been stalking her for months. Deeper in the closet, we found a laptop. The hard drive had been wiped, but our digital forensics team recovered fragments. Search history from October 2016 revealed disturbing queries. How long before someone is declared dead? Wilderness areas near Riverside. Police search patterns for missing persons. We also found remnants of deleted emails. One fragment stood out, dated October 11th, 2016, sent to an encrypted account. Problem resolved. No complications. The recipient's identity was hidden, but the implication was clear. Mark hadn't acted alone. The break came from an unexpected source. A woman named Patricia Wells contacted the tip line. She'd been Mark Delaney's girlfriend briefly in 2015. I met her at a quiet restaurant across town. Patricia was nervous, constantly glancing around as if worried someone might overhear. Mark wasn't violent with me, she said carefully, but he was obsessive. He'd show up places I didn't tell him I'd be. He'd mention details about my day I never shared. When I confronted him, he acted like I was paranoid. How did the relationship end? I broke up with him after finding cameras hidden in my apartment. Tiny ones, professionally installed. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He said he was protecting me, that the world was dangerous and he needed to monitor my safety. I moved out that night. Patricia pulled out her phone, showing me old text messages. After we broke up, he kept messaging me. Most of it was normal, but occasionally he'd say strange things. Look at this one from October 15th, 2016. The message read, "People make choices. Some people choose to betray trust. Sometimes those choices have permanent consequences." That was the day after Hannah Brooks was reported missing, I said. Patricia nodded. I didn't connect it at the time, but after I saw the news about her body being found, I realized the timing. Mark sent that message the day after she disappeared. She scrolled further. And look at this from 6 months later. Another message. I've learned that problems don't solve themselves. Sometimes you have to take decisive action, even when it's difficult. Especially when people in authority won't help. People in authority, I repeated, like police officers. Patricia's eyes widened. You think he had help from inside the department? I'm starting to believe exactly that. Derek Paulson agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for reduced charges. He gave us access to his personal records from 2016, including phone logs the department never reviewed. On October 12, 2016, 2 days after the domestic disturbance call, Paulson received a phone call from Mark Delaney. They spoke for 17 minutes. Paulson claimed Mark called to thank him for his professionalism, to say he checked on Hannah and she seemed fine, just stressed about work. But phone records showed 4 more calls between them in the following week, each lasting 10 to 15 minutes. Conversations Paulson never documented. He was coaching you, Captain Pierce said, listening to Paulson's statement recording, making sure you'd minimize anything that pointed toward him. Mark understood psychology, Paulson admitted. He framed everything as concern for Hannah's privacy, respect for her autonomy. He made me feel like pursuing the case would be harassment. We pulled Mark's financial records. On October 20th, 2016, 6 days after Hannah disappeared, he'd made a cash withdrawal of $5,000. Paulson's bank records showed a cash deposit of $5,000 the same week. Paulson hadn't just been incompetent. He'd been bought. We arrested Mark Delaney on murder charges. His lawyer fought the arrest, arguing insufficient evidence. But the combination of surveillance photos, search history, witness statements, and Paulson's testimony gave us enough for a judge to deny bail. During processing, Mark remained unervingly calm. As he was being fingerprinted, he looked directly at me. You think you understand what happened, he said quietly. But you don't. Hannah wasn't a victim. She was careless. Careless how? She let people into her life without proper caution. She trusted too easily. I try to protect her from that weakness. I try to show her the world isn't safe. By stalking her, by watching over her. There's a difference, detective. I cared about Hannah more than anyone else did. I knew her schedule, her routines, her vulnerabilities. I could have kept her safe. Instead, you killed her. Mark's expression didn't change. I removed a problem. Hannah was going to ruin everything by reporting me. She threatened to get a restraining order to expose me as some kind of predator. She didn't understand I was only trying to help her. So you murdered her to silence her. I eliminated a threat. He said it like he was describing exterminating insects. And I would have gotten away with it if Derek had kept his nerve. But people are weak, detective. They break under pressure. The confession was recorded, witnessed, and ironclad. The trial began 6 months later. The prosecution built a methodical case, layer by layer. Surveillance photos showing obsessive stalking. Search histories revealing premeditation. Paulson's testimony about being manipulated and bribed. Patricia's testimony about Mark's controlling behavior and cryptic messages. Amy's testimony about Hannah's fear in her final weeks. Forensic experts testify that Hannah had been killed by blunt force trauma, likely from behind, consistent with being attacked when she was vulnerable. Her body had been wrapped in plastic, transported to Black Hollow Forest, and buried in a shallow grave that Mark had likely prepared days in advance. The defense tried to paint Mark as mentally ill, a man who'd become delusional in his affection for Hannah. But his methodical planning, his successful manipulation of a police officer, and his ability to evade detection for 8 years contradicted any claim of diminished capacity. Virginia Brooks took the stand. She described 8 years of agony, of not knowing whether her daughter was alive or suffering somewhere, of organizing searches that led nowhere, of being told by authorities to accept that Hannah had chosen to leave. I never accepted it, Virginia said, her voice steady despite tears streaming down her face. Because I knew my daughter. I knew she would never abandon me without a word. And I was right. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. Guilty on all counts. Mark Delaney received life in prison without the possibility of parole. Derek Paulson pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice, accepting a bribe, and falsifying official reports. He received 8 years. The Riverside Police Department launched an internal review of the original investigation. The findings were damning: multiple failures in procedure, inadequate follow-up on witness statements, premature closure of an active case. 4 officers received disciplinary action. 2 supervisors were demoted. But no amount of institutional reform could undo 8 years of lost time. Hannah Brooks had been dead within hours of the domestic disturbance call. If Paulson had done his job properly, if he'd investigated Mark's concerning behavior, if he'd taken Amy's warnings seriously, Hannah might have survived. Instead, she'd been failed by the very system meant to protect her. Captain Pierce announced policy changes at a press conference. Mandatory follow-up procedures for domestic disturbance calls. Enhanced training for recognizing stalking behavior. Creation of a cold case unit to review closed missing persons files. "We can't bring Hannah back," Pierce said, her voice heavy with regret. "But we can honor her memory by ensuring no one else falls through the cracks the way she did." I visited Virginia Brooks at her home several weeks after the trial ended. She'd aged visibly during the proceedings, the weight of truth somehow heavier than the weight of uncertainty. We sat in her kitchen, drinking tea from china cups that looked like they'd been carefully maintained for decades. On the wall hung a photograph of Hannah. Bright smile, warm eyes, a woman who believed in routines and trust and the basic goodness of people. "Do you have closure now?" I asked gently. Virginia considered the question. "I have answers. I know what happened to my daughter. I know who took her from me and why. But closure? I'm not sure that exists." She traced the rim of her teacup with one finger. "For 8 years, I held on to hope. Irrational hope? Maybe, but hope nonetheless. Part of me believed Hannah might walk through my door one day with an explanation that would make sense of everything. Now that hope is gone, the not knowing was agony, but this certainty is its own kind of pain. I'm sorry we didn't find her sooner. I'm sorry too, but I'm grateful you didn't stop looking." Virginia met my eyes. So many people told me to let it go, to move on, to accept that Hannah made her choice. You didn't. You treated her disappearance as if it mattered. It did matter. She mattered. Virginia nodded slowly. Yes, she did. And now maybe others will remember that too. 3 months after Mark's conviction, I received a letter. It was from a woman named Bethany Cole, living 2 states away. She'd seen news coverage of the trial. The letter described her experience with Mark Delaney in 2013, a year before Hannah moved to Riverside. Bethany had worked at the same security company. Mark had shown interest in her, asked her on dates. She politely declined. Then strange things started happening. Her car alarm going off repeatedly, someone going through her desk at work, calls from numbers that disconnected when she answered. One night, she woke to find Mark standing in her bedroom. He claimed he'd been worried about her safety, that he'd noticed someone suspicious near her house and wanted to check on her. He'd pick her door lock to make sure she was okay. Bethany filed a police report, but Mark's supervisor vouched for him, said he was a dedicated employee who'd probably overreacted out of genuine concern. No charges were filed. Bethany quit her job and moved away. "I've lived with guilt ever since," her letter concluded. "I knew Mark was dangerous. I knew he was escalating, but I didn't push hard enough to have him stopped. If I had, maybe Hannah would still be alive. I wanted you to know that she wasn't his first target, and if you hadn't caught him, she wouldn't have been his last." I added Bethany's letter to the growing file of people whose warnings about Mark Delaney had been ignored or dismissed. A pattern of dangerous behavior spanning years, visible to anyone who'd looked closely enough. But nobody had, until it was too late. I attended Hannah's memorial service on what would have been her 35th birthday. Virginia had waited 8 years to bury her daughter, insisting on holding the service on a day that celebrated life rather than mourning death. The church was packed. Former students, now teenagers, shared memories of Mrs. Brooks who'd made them feel seen and valued. Colleagues described her dedication. Friends recalled her kindness. Each story painted a picture of a woman whose impact extended far beyond the years she'd lived. Eleanor Grant, the principal, spoke about legacy. Hannah believed every child deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. She believed in second chances, in patience, in the power of encouragement. Those beliefs live on in every student she taught, every teacher she inspired, every parent she supported. Virginia asked if I would speak. I hadn't prepared anything, but I stood and shared what I'd learned. Hannah Brooks deserved better, I said simply. She deserved a system that took her fear seriously. She deserved neighbors who intervened instead of looking away. She deserved a police department that investigated thoroughly instead of choosing convenience. She deserved time to watch her students grow up, to make more memories with her mother, to experience all the moments that were stolen from her. I looked at Virginia, but what Hannah got was 8 years of being forgotten, dismissed, and blamed for her own disappearance. That's the truth we have to carry. And the only way to honor her is by making sure we never forget again. Mark Delaney never showed remorse. In interviews from prison, he maintained that he'd acted rationally, that Hannah had forced his hand by threatening to expose him, that society's rules about privacy and protection were fundamentally flawed. Psychologists who evaluated him diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder and obsessive tendencies, but legally competent. He understood right from wrong. He simply believed the rules didn't apply to him. In one interview, he was asked if he had anything to say to Hannah's family. "I gave Hannah more attention than anyone in her life," he replied. "I knew her better than her own mother did. I understood her patterns, her fears, her secrets. If she'd appreciated that instead of fighting it, she'd still be alive." The interviewer pressed. "So her death was her fault? Her death was a consequence of her choice to reject my protection. I offered her safety. She chose exposure. Actions have consequences." Those words haunted me, not because they revealed regret. They didn't, but because they revealed the complete absence of humanity. Mark Delaney genuinely believed he'd been wronged, that Hannah's murder was justified self-defense against her threat to report him. He would spend the rest of his life in prison, and he would never understand why. The Riverside Police Department's cold case review uncovered 3 other missing women whose cases had been prematurely closed. All 3 had filed complaints about feeling watched or followed in the months before they disappeared. All 3 cases had been investigated by officers who deemed the complaints unsubstantiated. One of those women was found, alive, living under a different name in another state, having fled an abusive partner. The other 2 remain missing. Their cases reopened with renewed urgency. The Hannah Brooks case became a catalyst for systemic change. Training protocols were rewritten. Victim advocacy groups were given more access to investigations. A tip line was established specifically for stalking complaints, ensuring they be tracked and investigated properly. But change came too late for Hannah. Too late for her mother, who'd spent 8 years grieving. Too late for the students who'd lost a teacher who saw their potential. Too late for everyone who'd loved her. Virginia Brooks established a scholarship in Hannah's name for students pursuing teaching degrees. The application required an essay about the importance of believing those who say they feel unsafe, about the responsibility we all carry to protect the vulnerable. Every year, on Hannah's birthday, the scholarship recipient visited Virginia. They'd sit in her kitchen, drinking tea from china cups, and Virginia would share stories about her daughter. Not the victim of a crime, but the woman who'd lived fully until someone decided she didn't deserve to. I keep Hannah's case file on my desk. Not the archived version gathering dust and storage, but a working file I reference regularly. It reminds me why this job matters. Hannah Brooks didn't vanish. She was taken. She didn't choose to leave her life behind. It was stolen from her by someone who convinced himself that obsession was protection, that stalking was care, that murder was justified. And she was failed by a system that prioritized convenience over thoroughness, by officers who took the easy answer instead of asking hard questions, by a society that still too often blames victims for making themselves targets. Her story isn't just about one woman's tragedy. It's about all the women who say they feel unsafe and aren't believed. All the reports that get minimized or dismissed. All the warning signs that get explained away until it's too late. The forest gave up Hannah's body after 8 years of silence. But the truth took even longer to surface, buried under layers of lies, incompetence, corruption, and willful blindness. We found her. We got justice. But justice doesn't resurrect the dead or restore lost time. All we can do now is remember. Remember that Hannah Brooks mattered, that her fear was real, that her death was preventable. And we can promise to her, to Virginia, to every person who's ever felt the weight of being watched, that will listen better, investigate harder, and never again choose comfort over truth. Because in towns like Riverside and systems like ours, being overlooked can be the most dangerous thing of all. Thank you for watching True Crime Files Gist. Hannah's story reminds us that behind every case is a person who deserved better. Someone's daughter, someone's friend, someone whose absence left a hole that can never be filled. These stories matter because they force us to confront uncomfortable truths about how we protect the vulnerable and hold the powerful accountable. If this case affected you, if Hannah's story made you think differently about the warning signs we ignore or the voices we dismiss, I ask you to do 3 things. Hit that like button to help others find this story. Subscribe to True Crime Files Gist so you never miss another case that deserves to be remembered. And share this video with someone who needs to understand why believing victims matters. Every share, every like, every subscription helps ensure that stories like Hannah's aren't forgotten and that the changes her tragedy inspired continue to save lives. Thank you for bearing witness. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being part of a community that refuses to look away. I'll see you in the next case.